Hi guys and ladies, welcome back to another exciting episode. My name is Disema Matietsi. This is episode number 22 of the Being an Analyst podcast, and what we're discussing today is the little bit of data governance. We're talking about data governance, especially after you have just set up your data, you've decided which data you're gonna be having and how you're gonna be handling it. We're just gonna be talking about data governance immediately after our theme song, so stay tuned. You might have seen in episode 21 that we've spoken about different type of databases, and I know that all of us that are excited about getting started with data, that was enough for us to say, no, we're gonna get started. We're ready. Show us, what can we do? But in hindsight, before we start with just the doing, we have to realize that there's a little bit of a process that we have to follow, especially when we are working with well-established organization, or we are trying to open up, help an SMME become a large organization. In so doing, we have to adhere to data governance structures. So data governance is not always a nice part, but it's a necessary part, especially when you have to come with auditing. You have to actually look at what is data governance. So in here, let's just start from the beginning. Why is governance important and what does it look like? So governance is part of corporate governance. Data governance is part of corporate governance. Corporate governance, this is where the board of directors are assigned the responsibility to govern the whole entire organization. So by governing the whole entire organization, even our databases themselves have to be governed in a certain way. So they need to make sure that they're not exposing clients' information, they're not stealing people's money, they are adhering to the rules. That's why the governance is needed. So all of that, you'll see it's also part of the King governance report. So it goes according to those feedback of the King report. And then once you look at that, within that King report, as much as corporate governance is part of the board of directors, we have another section that says, okay, information security governance is also part of the board of, is the responsibility of board of directors. But then senior management, which is where the execs, the C-suite is sitting in, are now become responsible for it. This is where you'll get frameworks that we're going to talk about it in episode number 23. Those frameworks are going to help you to say, how now do we do a RACI model? Who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed? We're talking about all of that when you come to information security governance. For that security, the C-suite has to know what's happening inside our databases. So you see it starts at the top. So the way that we're looking at it, the model of information security, it takes what we normally see on the database, which is what's visible. We're looking at compliance within the database. We're looking at level of trust that the organization should have within the database that you just created. We're also looking at alignment with other things within the database itself. Is it aligned? We're looking for efficiencies, effective processes, efficient or effective processes. We're also looking for due care or due diligence within your database itself. So whether we follow a decision-making framework or we follow the performance management framework, all of this we can see that is part of corporate governance, that before you start making up your own database itself, there needs to be a lot of decisions that are taking place to say, how should the data look like? So I'm sure already here, you can see that before you decide to rename columns the way that you want to, you're gonna have a directive to tell you how you should rename your columns. And it is so because for cybersecurity governance, you have to be told how things should be mapped out. So the documentation will come through to say this is what the board is giving us. The board of directors want the database to look like. If you're working for a small company, that will be the person who registered the company, the managing director, the director of the company will tell you, listen, I want you to make sure that our our stock is taken care of. You must keep records of our stock, must keep records of our customers, must keep records of our transactions. All of that is the directive that they tell you. We just don't go in a database and we create tables as we want to. We are given by the directive to say, according to the way that we want to run this business, we need a database that looks like that. We need another one that will take these records, another one that will keep this according to the rules of what we play on. So that becomes on governance. And as they are doing that, as they're saying, you have to open up a customer's database or table, you can already see that the information security part of things has to be addressed, to say who's going to have access to it and how they're going to have access to it. All of that has to be documented before you even start with the database itself, if you are lucky. Otherwise, you can always, go back and forth and go for a board or approval or senior management approval so that you can do your database itself. So there are models that we're going to be talking about in episode 23 to help you set up this, but from the top, that's just what it looks like. Now, if we call this information security governance, how do we execute this information security governance? So the way that you realize it is you have to start at the top, board of directors or company owner. It has to come down to executive committee or whoever is running the small company at the time. It goes down to whoever is responsible for security, and it goes down to the people who will be doing your security. And then the same will be true from board of directors, executives, whoever is running your IT department, and whoever will be running the data team itself. So the information security person and you who's creating the database could work together into doing this. If it's a small company, you'll be one person. You'll be doing information security, and you will be doing data creation and manipulation and access. Access is information security, but you'll be doing that alone. Of course, you can see there's a risk there, because what's going to happen if you decide to give the wrong people access and the board of directors or the company owner doesn't know? You can already see there needs to be some governance there. But when there's you who's handling up the data, and there is somebody else who's handling out the access, which is the information security side of things, then at least you guys share the burden within knowing how the data needs to be done. But everything else that's with the board of directors or company owner, they might assign you a person who's going to be your senior manager, and then from the senior manager then becomes you and this person who's going to be responsible for information security. So from there, if it's a big company, you might find some complexities where you have a dedicated information security committee away from a dedicated data committee. So the data side might have a chief data officer who's responsible for capturing the data, and on the other side you have the chief information security officer who's responsible for making sure that the right people have got the right access to the right things. Failure to not have an information security section or rules into your own data structure is you are not going to be able to realize the information security is the responsibility of social governance, corporate governance, because you have to realize that in order for a company to exist, information security has to be part of the board of directors' responsibility. So not putting somebody else in charge there already says a lot about the company commitment to the growth or to holding on to the data itself, to say the data is going to be quite safe, it's going to be taken care of. And we've seen where big companies like Verizon was demanding some money because I think it had put its data in Yahoo, and Yahoo had some hacking that happened there, and because Verizon had, in its corporate governance, as part of the board of directors, they said, hang on a second, the information security we're not going to handle within our company, we're going to hand it over to Yahoo. And it happened that Verizon data was hacked, and then now it went to Yahoo, and it said, Yahoo, we are Verizon, we are a telecommunication company that actually captures our customers' data, but you were supposed to help us with information security, but now we are hacked. You're supposed to pay us whatever was happening, and I think they had to pay $1 billion. This was in 2016, just because of that hoo-ha that happened. And I think by now you can already think in the back of your head, we have the RICA rule, we have the electronic ECT also compliance, and the POPI, POPI Act, which actually helps out to say you as a small company or as a big company, you have responsibility to do with people's data itself. So that's the corporate governance side of it. And the other issue here is assuming that information is only a technical issue and not a business issue. Comes most of the time where data people will be asked, can you create something so that the system can work? And then we always thinking that belongs to the technical side of things, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it is the business that's responsible for whatever we put inside those databases. It's the business responsibility to say, hang on a second, we need 5 tables and we need them maintained this way. They can't just say, the data team, go crazy. As long as our systems are working, as long as our apps are working, you have a free for all, do whatever you want. That will not happen. It has to, the company is the one that says, you know what, we're gonna let you have your database implemented, whatever you choose, relational, you choose a craft one, you can do technical things, or we can even tell you what database you should have, and we can implement firewalls on it. We can implement the information security policies to make sure that who should access the data, when should it expire, when do you even, if you are allowed to delete the data or not. All of that is the business rule, and failure to realize it and create a big information security governance, you're going to be missing out on that part. And also, we need to realize that this whole information security governance is actually a multidimensional discipline. So you can't just come and looking at it from one side. So it's all about making sure that whatever needs to be put in place is not just relying on tech itself. Like for instance, you can't just put on high-tech controls to say, hey, people need to do a long password and then we're gonna leave it there and we are done. No, it is a multi-dimensional discipline, because you have to look at those controls to say password is in there, and then you also have to look at the human element, the whatever element, and then put all those dimensions together and make sure that it is part of the business control. And I know it's going to create a lot of irritation, especially for data people, to be hearing from a document telling you what to do while you just created your own database. That creates a bit of frustration, but I'm here to say you don't have to be frustrated. And also ignoring the importance of, because sometimes there might be standards that we can follow, there might be frameworks that we can follow, and ignoring those frameworks can actually put us in a terrible part. We realize that with companies like MasterCard and an American bank, Wells Fargo, where they have non-compliance clause published on their website stipulating that the penalties for all those who are not payment card industry data security standards compliant will have whatever restrictions on themselves, because they knew that, we have some international standards that we can follow. If we are not following those, it comes to our detriment. So as much as we hate it, governance is really, really tough, but it has to happen. It has to be taken into consideration. So let's just talk about what does governance actually look like. So the structure is like a triangle. As we have said, with board of directors, we have senior management, middle managers, and then we have operations. So in this case, I'll say it's the strategic level. Strategic level where is board of directors and C-suite or company owner. So that's the strategic level. And then you have a tactical level in the middle, which is the people that take the policies or the wish of the company directors and they turn it into policies or procedures that needs to be followed. And at the bottom, you have the operational level. This is where you would be sitting with your team to create the database yourself. You do whatever you have to do in the form of a policy on an operational level. And then after that, use feedback to the board of directors by using what is called controls. So a control is just, if we said we're going to be importing data daily, that will be the directive to say, make sure that the data is imported or is saved daily. It comes down to the operational level. And then after that, we're going to be ticking on the box to show that data is being done daily. So that process that you see, directive coming down and a control going up, it's called auditing. Where we say, okay, hang on a second, we had promised that daily there's going to be work being done on the database, making sure that it's safe. And then here's the proof to show that data was saved on a daily basis. So that is the auditing function. So when we are doing auditing, we're just saying whatever was been asked or published in our company's profile or company books, it is exactly what's happening. So it becomes a nice triangle where from the board of directors upward, they send a directive, it patches to the technical level, where it gets broken down into procedures and how-to manuals. And from there, then it goes down to the operational level, where the data administrator, data engineers are going to be implementing those policies. And then upward, you have to say, every time when you import data, you have to keep a record. And then that goes upward in a form of auditing. So your manager or senior manager might be asking all the time, did you do this? And it's quite irritating, but it's very important to report back to the technical level or strategic level that says to the board of directors, yes, the data is being saved. Yes, there's 5 tables, we have seen them. Yes, those 5 tables have got relationships. Yes, those 5 tables are maintained. Yes, the data that's been deleted is not being lost, but rather is taken to another server. And we did verify that it is moving from an operational server to now to our data warehouse. All of those things are what is being sent back to the board of directors or to the strategic level. Just looking at what needs to happen. So I know the biggest part of things is the controls, how they are irritating us, because most of the data people do not like controls, which is you having to feedback all the time to say, what are you doing? But you know, the controlling part, it's there to verify that the policies are being compliant with, and that means that for every policy generated on the directing part of the cycle, there should be a measure in place in the control part of the cycle. And that's it. I know it's irritating, but I'm trying to say, after listening to this episode, probably you should start to embrace it, because it goes hand in hand. There's not just, if there's a control without a directive, I mean, you have to question that control to say, oh, hang on a second, why do we need a long password? Why people can't they just do, you know, a simple, easy password? Why do they have to have a long password? Another directive to say, why are we spending so much money on single sign-on? Wow, you can question all of those. But once you realize that, oh, hang on a second, the board of directors has agreed that the process should be simple. When you log into your computer, only then can you be able to access the database. Then it means you have no other option but to implement single sign-on as authentication towards your database. And you just go accordingly. So that's just on the governance side of things. Before we go crazy on our database, we have to actually look at our governance side of things. How does governance look like? Which is the framework. Also split into, remember, the strategic, the technical or managerial or operational, and then also the technical, which is where you'll be sitting. Under the strategic, what we need there is leadership and governance, because we need somebody who sits there who's going to become a sponsor for whatever your data team wants to do. So a sponsor is somebody where you say, we need to move our database from from SQL to NoSQL, or from NoSQL to SQL now, from graph to relational, or we want to do a key value type of database. You need a sponsor who will sit at the top, at the board level, to say, we have to change our database structure. It doesn't work out the way that we have a relational. We inherited relational from what our competitors are doing, but it doesn't work out for us because we need to show people how many nodes there are away from each other, or degree of separations. Our database is not structured correctly. We have to change the database to show what we want to do. So you need a sponsor. Number 2, you have to get somebody else who's going to put whatever you are doing as part of the strategy, company strategy. You need IT governance, number 3, also at that level to help you with whatever you want to do. Number 4, risk assessment, because if you're saying we're going to change the type of database, we have to check how easy it is to get people with that know-how, who's going to be maintaining it, how likely it is that you might leave our organization. And on top of that, we need the last one, which is number 5, we need, return on investment, whatever you are proposing, or whatever matrices that we're going to be putting in place to measure the effectiveness of whatever you are doing. So that's just on the strategic level. Before you even start to say, hang on a second, I'm going to need a database that, whoa, think about number 1, who in the strategy side or in the strategic level will be able to help me achieve this desire of re-engineering or re-changing our database. And hence why it's quite important for us to have this conversation on data governance, because on the governance side of things, you have to say, hang on a second, who can we reach out to at the top of the organization who can help us with changing our database the way that we want it to be. Now, when you go into the managerial or the technical, which is where managerial and operations take place, you have different facets that you have to think about. In a big organization, you might have a security management of the organization, where you have to look at how do they put the whole program together, who get access to what. You have to also understand their legal and their regulatory requirements. Maybe their legal and regulatory requirement says, if I'm sitting in finance, I cannot have access to HR information. But the people that are actually in finance know very well that you need HR information to actually start doing your budgeting. So it's a catch-22 to say how much of HR information is allowed before you do your budgeting. You might find out that, okay, if all you need is the rent value, can we group people by job titles so that you can, we have the analyst, instead of analyst 1, 2, 3, we have all the analysts together, and then we lump it together to say it's going to be 7 million a month for all these 5 analysts. This is how they're going to, budget it, budget lump sum instead of individually. All of that policy will come into play. That's just looking at the security management and the security policies, in fact, because in the policies itself, you're going to be hit with procedures, you're going to be hit with standards that you must follow, you're going to be hit with guidelines that you must follow, as well as the certifications to say, oh, hang on a second, before you do another step, there needs to be a digital certificate that go into place, or you might be asked to go attend some other course and get certificate in risk management or whatever the case, before you start handling the data itself. So whatever information security guys and ladies feel like you should be doing is because it's coming from the board directive. Just don't get irritated to say, hey, they're sending me from corner to post. And besides that, they'll have other issues that they might be pushing on the side, which is maybe refresher trainings that they might want you to go attend. Sometimes they will feel like they're taking you away from whatever you needed to do. So from from the technical side of thing, or on the operational level, you're looking at technology protection and operations. That's where you are now doing asset management to say this server needs to be handled this way. You're looking at system development because, as part of our data, we might be required to have that data because we are building some stuff. So system development, incident management, when something happens, how quick can we actually revert from that error? All of those have to be documented. Technical operations to say when person A logs in, what do they do? Standard operating procedures. You document that. You put it into place to say we're going to be opening up a database, but out of our database is going to be accessed following these procedures. And then you have the normal environment that you're working in, as well as business continuity planning to say what's going to happen when our internet connection is down or our satellite is down, and we can only access the database. Our authentication happens with the satellite, and it comes down to authenticate you. And what happens when all of those things are not working? So I know all of this becomes much more of a difficulty burden when you're just thinking, oh, it was gonna be easy, I can just start up a database and I'm ready to go. But now I'm saying, hang on a second. Before you get excited about starting a database, you have to consider governance, IT governance, information security governance, as well as data governance, because all of that has to sit with are we going to be managing whatever we're going to be putting into the database itself. It's not just an easy, let's create the database, let's be happy, but it is a continuous process. So there's various processes that needs to be followed to make sure that this is in place. The first one that I would say is get a board buy-in or a director's buy-in. Look out for best practices that we're going to be discussing in episode number 23. Research those, find out which one is applicable. Do your risk assessment to check, if we go with this database, if we do this, what are our risks? Assess that. Create a corporate information security policy to say our security in our database is going to be accessed this way, and this is only these people are going to be accessing it. You can put all of that in there and then get it signed off. You can also create some nice policy architecture to say our data or security architecture is designed this way. This person is accountable. This person has to be consultant. These ones are informed. And then do your operational structure also, to say we have the managing director or CEO and all of these people have got this much access to the data or have not have this much access to the data. And then do an awareness program afterwards to say, hang on a second, we have created the controls in here. Let's do an awareness program, all different departments within your organization to say, hang on a second, guys, as a data team, we want you to know that you cannot access this. You can only access this side. If you want this information, let us know. We get it this way. It takes this long to come around. And then, you get everything else going to make sure that when the auditing side of things come into play, you'll be on a better side. You won't be caught, naked to say, oh my God, we didn't have the program in place. And then when it comes to awareness programs, don't just do it once. Keep it going for as long as possible. So you need to do a continuous awareness program to make sure that everybody else know how do you get access to the data that you just created through all of that. In fact, even the devices that needs to be going through all of that, they just need to know about it. I hope you find this exciting. When we come to episode number 23, we're going to be delving in each of the best practices. We're going to be looking at COVID, going to be looking at ITIL, going to be looking at ISO or IEC 27000, 27001, and 27002, as well as what happens when you have to look at quality management, which is the ISO or IEC 9001, 9001, 9002. We have to look at all of those best practices to say, now how do you implement quality management and information security compliance within your data team just before you start with your analysis, because all of this impacts your analysis. If your data is not structured properly, you might not have access, or you might not even be able to share your reports with other people.